The Sea Within. Benjamin Franklin's Early Voyages, 1723 to 1730. The Departure from Boston. It began not with thunder, but with restlessness. A young apprentice, 17 years old, ink-stained, clever, and hungry for more than what his brother's press could offer. The year was 1723. Boston still smelled of tallow, fish, and salt, a harbor of commerce and sermons. Benjamin Franklin had already learned to read the wind and the water, and perhaps more dangerously, he'd learned to think for himself. He loved the sea long before he ever crossed it. As a boy, he wrote, "I had a strong inclination for the sea. Living near the water, I was much in and about it, learnt early to swim well, and to manage boats." Those words would echo through his life. Because the water was more than pastime, it was metaphor. He didn't know it yet, but he was learning navigation not only of boats, but of himself. The leaving. The quarrels at home had sharpened. His older brother James, printer of the New England Courant, was quick-tempered, and Benjamin, too clever to stay silent, grew rebellious. Their working relationship became a tug-of-war between control and intellect. In the narrow workshop, the smell of ink and vinegar clung to the air. James barked orders. Ben quietly planned escape. He had read enough classical lives to know that liberty sometimes begins with a door left unlatched. And so, one night in late September, he slipped out of Boston, leaving family, trade, and safety behind. He carried little more than a few coins and his wits. His destination, New York, and perhaps beyond. The costs for travel fare back then is hard to pinpoint, trips across the Atlantic being quite expensive, while local river boats could sometimes take barter just as easily as coin. He would later call it an errand of mischief turned to fortune. The coastal journey. The journey southward was neither romantic nor easy. He traveled partly on foot, partly by small boat. The weather turned rough, the wind contrary. At one point, he found himself soaked and sleepless, rowing in the rain beside strangers, his stomach empty, his mind alight. I'd like to note now that these travels were still during a time called the Little Ice Age. When he finally reached Burlington, New Jersey, he boarded a riverboat that carried him downstream toward Philadelphia. He was penniless, dirty, and exhausted, but free. He later wrote,
"I was fatigued with travelling, rowing, and want of rest, and being very hungry, I made shift to purchase 3 great puffy rolls."
That scene became legend. Franklin, entering the city that would one day bear his fame, with 1 roll under each arm, eating the 3rd. You can also see this represented in one of our earlier videos. A comical, humble entrance, yet somehow symbolic. The self-made man arriving under no flag but his own appetite for knowledge. A young woman named Deborah Red watched him pass by that morning. Years later, she would become his wife. The first impressions. Philadelphia in 1723 was a place between worlds. A colony, but also a promise. Wide streets lined with low brick houses, muddy lanes, the Delaware glinting through the mists. Franklin, weary and still half a boy, looked around and saw not squalor, but potential. He found work soon enough at a printing house run by Samuel Keimer, a chaotic man, more dreamer than businessman. The shop was a mess of paper, ink, and unpaid bills, but Franklin didn't care. He had work. He had begun. At night, he walked along the wharves, watching ships load and unload under the lantern glow. He listened to sailors' tales, storms, ports, survival. The sea called again, louder this time, promising not escape, but understanding. An invitation across the ocean. Then came the promise, one that would send him back to sea. Sir William Keith, governor of Pennsylvania, took notice of the young printer's sharp mind and industriousness. Flattered, Franklin listened as the governor spoke of opportunity, that he should sail to England, acquire printing equipment, and return to set up his own press. Keith assured him letters of credit and introduction awaited. It sounded like destiny. Franklin, ambitious but still trusting, believed him. And so, in the winter of 1724, Benjamin Franklin, now 20, boarded a ship bound for London. He was not yet the scientist, nor the philosopher, nor the elder statesman. He was a tradesman with ink under his nails and a dream in his pocket. What he didn't yet know was that Governor Keith's letters were empty. When Franklin reached London after a storm-tossed voyage, he would find no credit, no introductions, no equipment, only the world's largest city and the truth that no one was coming to save him. London, 1724. Franklin arrived to a cold, damp capital that smelled of coal smoke, sweat, and opportunity. He quickly learned that London's promises were as slippery as its cobblestones. He presented Keith's letter to a stationer, who looked at him blankly and said, "I don't know such a person." It was the sort of moment that breaks some men and makes others. Franklin laughed instead. Then he went to work. He found employment at Palmer's printing house on Bartholomew Close, a place filled with pressmen, apprentices, and the thick perfume of ink. There, among type cases and screw presses, he printed sermons, broadsides, and gossip, and taught himself the rhythms of European labor. He earned enough to live modestly. He read voraciously. In his off hours, he attended the London coffee houses, the early laboratories of modern thought. In one corner, men debated religion. In another, trade. In another, politics. Franklin listened. He measured their arguments like weather, noting who rose with reason, who fell with noise. He lived on bread, water, and thrift. And though he was surrounded by clamor, he grew quiet inside. A man alone in London, he had no patron, no guide, no promise. And so, he became his own compass. He learned to budget, to doubt, to observe. He began the small experiments that would define him, pouring oil on water to test the calming effect, noting the way smoke curled from a lamp when disturbed by drafts, recording the chill that crept through rooms before rain. He discovered that curiosity could feed him as well as any loaf of bread. London's rain soaked him, but it also refined him. He learned the discipline of economy, not just of money, but of attention. Everything he would later preach about thrift and virtue began here, in the damp light of an English morning. Departure once more. By 1726, he was restless again. The city had taught him much, but it wasn't home. He missed the colonies, their rawness, their room to grow. A merchant named Denham, seeing Franklin's diligence, offered him a position in his trading business and paid for his passage back to Philadelphia aboard the Berkshire. It would be Franklin's second great voyage, and this time he carried no illusions, only knowledge, habit, and a new humility. He packed a few books, his clothes, and a blank journal. He would fill that journal with one of the most quietly beautiful travel records of the 18th century, the Journal of a Voyage, 1726. It begins simply,
"We sailed from Gravesend with a fair wind at southwest."
and in those few words, a life begins to steady its course. July 22nd, Gravesend. He stands at the rail as London recedes, its chimneys a jagged line of memory. The Berkshire drifts out with the tide, sails full, gulls calling above the estuary. He notes only what matters, wind southwest, fair. But inside him, another current moves, the mixture of fear and freedom that comes when the world at last becomes horizon. He watches the river widen into sea. The grey water smells different here, brine and distance. He writes in his journal, not poetry, but fact, not emotion, but measure. He's learning that truth doesn't need ornament. July 25th, the Downs. Anchors up. The channel opens. Wind clean, sky merciful. He writes, "Weighed anchor and stood out to sea." It is his first true entry as a man leaving one continent for another, and he treats it with the same calm tone he once used to describe a print job. Already the scientist is awakening, the habit of writing the world as it is, not as he feels it. That night, as the ship creaks and settles, he lies awake below deck. The timbers moan, water sighs against a hull. He realizes that human ambition sounds much the same, restless, rhythmic, alive. July 28th, the leak. 3 days later, a sudden jolt. The Berkshire strikes a shoal. A leak opens forward, the hold begins to fill. The captain calls all hands. Franklin joins them. Hours pass in the half-dark. Men bent to the pump, shoulders slick with sweat and brine. He writes later, "We were obliged to pump almost continually." The entry is bare, but between those words lies revelation that endurance is quieter than fear, that salvation can be achieved one stroke at a time. When the storm passes, he realizes something profound, that the ocean doesn't test courage once. It tests it daily, in smaller, slower ways. August 2nd, the weather clears. Fine morning. Ship tight again, wind fresh at northwest. He notes it as a captain of self would note the mood of his soul. A little patching, a little patience, and all runs smooth. He walks the deck, learning how the ropes feel alive, how sails breathe like animals, how sunlight breaks into shards on wet boards. He admires the carpenter plugging the seam that nearly drowned them. In that man's calm craft, he sees philosophy. Repair, rather than rage, keeps things afloat. August 5th, the open sea. No land for days, only the line where sky meets water. He sounds the lead, no bottom at 100 fathoms. Then, life. Flying fish leap from the foam, silver as coins. He watches them glitter and vanish, chased by dolphins. He writes, "A dolphin is seldom caught without one of them in his belly." The observation is part curiosity, part poetry. The boy who once devoured books now studies the world itself. Each note is a promise to his future self. Keep looking, keep asking, keep recording. August 9th. Calm. Wind dies. The sea turns to polished glass. Men sprawl on the deck, half asleep. Franklin reads instead. Milton, perhaps, or Mather's Essays to Do Good. He walks slowly from bow to stern, watching his reflection pass below him, a double suspended in blue. In that stillness, he senses a truth he cannot yet phrase, that motion isn't always progress, that stillness, too, can be study. He writes, "All hands idle, but his mind is never still." August 12th. Experiment with oil. The rumor circulates among sailors. Oil calms the waves. Franklin asks to try it. He pours a spoonful onto the water. It spreads, thin as glass, smooth as patience. He watches, waiting. The surface trembles, then steadies. The ship seems to drift on silk. He smiles, not because it proves anything yet, but because it asks to be proved again. In that simple act lives the embryo of the American Enlightenment, not faith against reason, but curiosity as faith. August 17th. The dolphin. They catch a dolphin today. Its colors flash and fade, sea green to silver to pale white, as life drains away. He watches with quiet reverence. In the belly, the crew finds flying fish, just as he'd written. He notes the fact, unadorned, but it's a kind of confirmation. Observation rewarded, reason vindicated. He eats the meat gratefully, savoring something fresh after weeks of salted rations. He does not record that taste, but perhaps he should have. August 22nd, storm. Wind rises before dawn. Canvas slams, rigging screams. The pump resumes its weary chant. He works beside sailors now, shoulder to shoulder. Some curse God. Franklin counts strokes. Lightning dances along the mast, a brief, unholy beauty. He stares, not in terror, but calculation. How does it travel? What path does it choose? He doesn't know yet that one day he'll call down that same fire with string and key. When the storm passes, he writes simply, blustering time. Ship labored heavily. Even his understatement sounds like strength. August 27th, quiet. The ship drifts again under a generous sky. He reads, writes, and considers the odd virtue of monotony. No great deeds, no grand conversions, only the daily keeping of order. He thinks of his life as a vessel, seams to be sealed, ballast to be trimmed, leaks of pride to be watched. This thought will harden years later into his plan for moral perfection, but here it's still half dream, half oath. He writes, read a little. Slept well. A man who can record such calm has already won a private war. September 2nd, sea of weeds. The ocean thickens with green weed. The men grumble, fearing they drift in circles. Franklin leans over the side, studying the floating vines. He notes their direction, their persistence, their company of small crabs and fish. He wonders if this means a current, one that moves apart from wind. Decades later, he'll draw it on a chart and name it the Gulf Stream. For now, he only writes, sea of weeds. Water green and warm, a small sentence, a seed that will grow into science. September 8th, leak again. Another seam opens, another night of pumping. The men groan. Franklin joins them. He works until his arms ache, then pauses to observe how the water rises and falls, how the light of a lantern quivers on it. Even exhaustion becomes data. He writes, sprung a leak forward, crew pumping most of the night. And perhaps he smiles, the universe still unbroken, his curiosity still afloat. September 15th, flying fish. In the small hours, several flying fish strike the deck and die there, gleaming. He picks one up, examines its wings, the translucent ribs like parchment. He marvels that nature contrived this halfway creature, neither bird nor fish, but both. He thinks of it later when he writes of invention, that all progress is some impossible hybrid between two known things. He eats one for breakfast and finds it delicate, like river perch. The taste lingers. He writes nothing about that either. September 20th, meditation. No entries for several days. Perhaps the ink ran thin, or perhaps words failed. He paces the deck at sunset, watching light break against the sea in molten sheets. He thinks of London's smoke, of Boston's narrow alleys, of the smell of his father's soap boiling in vats. The ocean, he realizes, cleanses memory but keeps the scent. Every life is distilled the same way, fire, then calm, then understanding. He begins to plan. What sort of man he will be once ashore. Orderly, industrious, temperate. He is drafting a constitution for one. September 28th, land birds. The first birds appear, sparrows, starlings, land seekers. The crew cheers. He writes, many small birds about the ship, signs of land, simple, factual, yet written with the relief of all creation in it. Even knowledge can feel like salvation. October 3rd, smell of land. He writes, water discolored, smell of land in the wind. The men laugh, call him philosopher, but soon they smell it too. Pine, damp earth, promise. He closes his journal that night, knowing they'll see the Delaware within the week. He sleeps soundly for the first time since London. October 11th, arrival. He sees Cape Henlopen at dawn. The light is soft, American, forgiving. He writes one word, thankful. No sermons, no flourish, just that. It is the perfect ending of a perfect education. Years later, when he reads over the journal, he finds it too plain. But that plainness is the point. Every man begins his philosophy by describing the weather. Franklin had simply chosen the right wind to follow. The Berkshire glides into the Delaware Bay under a calm October sun. Philadelphia rises ahead, the same city that once met him with bread and exhaustion, but he is not the same. 2 years in London and 80 days of open sea have changed him in ways he can't yet name. He walks down the gangplank leaner, sun-darkened, eyes sharpened by the miles behind him. He carries no fortune, only habits. The patience of pumping, the habit of writing, the instinct to watch before acting. The ocean has carved away the excess. What remains is a man of method. He begins again, quietly, with no announcement. He works under others, saves, reads, plans. The discipline of the voyage now turns inward. If before he charted currents, now he begins to chart himself. He lodges once more in a modest room and falls into rhythm. Early rising, steady labor, nightly reflection. He keeps a small book beside his bed, recording virtues like a captain recording soundings. Temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality. They are simple words, but for him, they are tools. The moral rigging that will hold a man upright when life's storms return. Each morning feels like stepping onto a deck at dawn. Inspect the sails, take the wind's measure, note the flaws, correct the course. Where other men pray for luck, Franklin builds routine. He's seen what the sea does to the careless. Philadelphia's streets are lively now. Craftsmen, traders, preachers, sailors, Quakers. Franklin begins gathering minds as deftly as he once gathered type. He calls them the Junto, a club for mutual improvement. They meet in taverns and back rooms, bringing ideas instead of ale. Each member poses questions, and Franklin moderates them with the calm of a helmsman.
How might we better educate our apprentices? What causes the winds to blow? What is the truest way to serve the public good?
He listens, records, debates. It is a ship of thought, sailing without compass, yet always finding its way back to reason. Some speak of God, others of science. Franklin lets both coexist, like wind and tide, opposing but necessary. He has learned from water itself that contradiction can be harmony, if steered wisely. The ocean, though far behind him, has not released its hold. He feels it in quiet moments, the slow breathing of tide beneath thought. When he walks along the Delaware at evening, he studies how current meets current, how debris circles in quiet eddies. Each pattern whispers a principle. Each reflection becomes a theory. He pours a little oil on the river's surface to see if the ripples still. It does, faintly. He smiles. He remembers the same trick from the Atlantic, the drop that calmed a patch of stormy sea. The sailor's superstition had become an experiment. Now it becomes proof. He writes in his notebook, "A spoonful of oil will calm near half an acre of agitated water." The scientist is being born, midwifed by memory. He begins to keep weather notes. temperature, wind direction, pressure, smell. He observes that storms often travel from the west, even when winds seem to blow from the east. He wonders why. He jots a question that will preoccupy him for years. Why does lightning follow the same pattern as a spark from metal? He cannot yet answer, but he knows how to wait. The sea had taught him patience, that every revelation begins with watching. When others see the world as chaos, he sees rhythm. Where others fear thunder, he hears law. Even years later, when his printing house hums with work, Franklin finds reasons to walk by the Delaware. The ships there remind him of the Berkshire, though he never speaks of it. He watches the way small boats slide along the tide, how sunlight shatters across ripples. The air smells of oak barrels and pitch, and it carries something deeper, continuity. He begins to think of himself as part of a larger current, one man in motion among many. He writes essays about civic life that sound almost nautical. If each man keeps his post and mends his sail, the ship of state will not founder. The lessons of the sea have simply changed their names. In 1728, he starts drafting a book he will never finish, The Art of Virtue. It is less a sermon than a sailor's log for moral navigation. Each chapter marks a reef to avoid, a current to ride. He writes,
Temperance first, for it clears the head. Order next, for it keeps the ship in trim.
When asked how to govern men, he answers,
The same as to govern a vessel, by understanding its nature and using wind, not force.
He sees life as an ocean, vast, capricious, and worth the crossing. No wave can be conquered, only understood. Between work and invention, he keeps noticing small things, how the smell of air changes before rain, how the warmth of a stove moves in circles, how ants find food as sailors find ports, by invisible signals. Nothing escapes his eye. He begins keeping jars, not of exotic fish or curiosities, but of samples. Rainwater, soot, oil, ash. Each one a small experiment waiting for its turn. He will later say, half in jest, that curiosity is the hunger of the mind. But it was no jest to him. It was sustenance. He had fed that hunger first on a ship, staring into the endless blue, wondering what law kept it all in motion. The return to motion. By 1730, Franklin is a man of consequence, a printer of reputation, a thinker of growing stature. But his soul remains maritime. He still wakes early, still moves with the rhythm of waves. He still distrusts certainty. He still prefers the company of questions to the comfort of dogma. The Berkshire is long gone, likely broken up or lost to weather, but he carries her everywhere. When he draws the Gulf Stream decades later, he's only finishing the map that began in his 20-year-old mind. When he studies electricity, he is still hearing the wind rattle the rigging and watching lightning search for ground. When he writes of moderation and thrift, he is remembering how it felt to share a ration of water with desperate men. He once said,
Energy and persistence conquer all things.
But persistence came first on the Atlantic, when pumps clattered through the night and he learned that endurance is the truest philosophy. From that voyage grew a lifelong faith, not in luck, but in labor, not in miracles, but in the human ability to study the storm until it makes sense. He would go on to embody many titles: printer, scientist, inventor, diplomat. But beneath them all was the sailor, the observer of wind, the mender of leaks, the recorder of tides. The sea had made him. The land would only reveal what it had taught. And so, as age approaches and his hair turns white, Franklin still writes by candlelight, still turns to questions like a compass seeking north. He no longer sails, yet he carries the ocean inside him. Each idea a current, each discovery a tide returning home. He has learned that knowledge, like the sea, humbles before it enlightens. That to master anything, one must first drift a little, must be lost long enough to learn the language of water. When he looked back on that journey of 1726, he found no heroism in it, only endurance. But endurance was the foundation of all his greatness. He had crossed an ocean and found a continent not just of land, but of self. And in that vastness, the sea never really ended. It lived in his experiments, his philosophies, his humor, his silence. It became, as he would later call virtue, a tide within the mind. He was a boy who loved the water, a man who studied it, and an old sage who carried it quietly, still charting the depths of human nature as if they were just another ocean waiting to be mapped. The voyage ended in 1726, but the sea within him, that voyage never ended.